The helicopter couldn't land. Dense canopies swallowed the clearing we'd marked from satellite scans, forcing our pilot to hover while we fast-roped down through wet, choking heat that smelled like fermentation and river mud. My boots hit the forest floor and sank half an inch into black loam so saturated it glistened like oil. "Welcome to the blank spot," Jensen muttered behind me, unclipping from the rope and scanning the undergrowth. Our NGO specialized in first contact preservation, document, establish non-invasive aid, leave cultural structure untouched. Officially, we were here because aerial surveys had spotted fire plumes and primitive terracing on an island cluster southeast of Sulawesi that didn't exist on any anthropological registry. Unofficially, we were here because fishermen from 3 neighboring archipelagos had vanished near the same coastline over the last decade. Local stories blamed orang kecil pemakan malam, little people who eat at night. "Radio check," I said, adjusting the damp collar of my field vest. "Clear," Jensen replied. "Clear," echoed Talia, our ethnobotanist, already photographing moss strata like we hadn't just dropped into a myth. The pilot gave us a 2-day window before fuel logistics forced retrieval. Then the helicopter vanished above the foliage, rotors fading into insect thunder. The forest closed around us instantly. Indonesia's interior jungles don't simply grow, they layer. Vines corkscrewed around buttress roots wider than trucks. Ferns the size of surfboards sagged under condensation. Every surface hosted something parasitic or symbiotic or quietly waiting for blood. We trekked 6 hours inland following thermal drone readings. The first evidence appeared at dusk. Footprints. Talia crouched beside them, brushing away fallen kapok fibers. "These aren't children," she said carefully. The impressions were small, no longer than 15 centimeters, but deep, suggesting weight disproportionate to size. 5 toes, arched instep, heel pronounced. Fully human morphology, just scaled down. "Homo floresiensis," Jensen whispered. "The hobbit fossil lineage was supposed to have died out 50,000 years ago," I said. Talia didn't respond. She was staring at something else beside the tracks. Scrape marks. Parallel gouges in bark about knee height, clustered and repeated as though something had been dragged or held in place. Night descended fast. We established camp in a narrow limestone hollow overlooking a tributary stream, stringing hammocks between strangler figs while humidity crawled into every seam of our gear. The jungle changed tone after sunset. Diurnal shrieks softened into lower, deliberate noises, wet clicks, distant branch snaps, and once, something that sounded unmistakably like laughter but too rhythmic to belong to anything human. At 2:13, Jensen shook me awake without speaking. He pointed. Across the stream, roughly 20 meters out, small silhouettes stood motionless between buttress roots. Fireflies drifted around them, giving intermittent flashes of shape, rounded skulls, elongated arms, torsos wrapped in what looked like layered bark or woven fungus mats. There were 6 of them, watching us. I raised one open palm slowly, universal non-aggression posture. They didn't move. Then one lifted something in its hand and dropped it deliberately onto the stones beside the water. The object landed with a dull, hollow knock. The figures retreated soundlessly into foliage, vanishing so completely the jungle seemed to inhale them. Jensen crossed the stream first, rifle slung but ready. I followed, every nerve screaming that curiosity had historically been lethal for people in my profession. The object was a carved bowl made from polished coconut shell. Inside sat a human molar, cleaned meticulously. Still streaked red inside the root canal. Talia exhaled shakily. "That's not archaeological." From deeper in the jungle, branches rustled in coordinated waves, like something small and numerous repositioning in the dark. We stood there listening, 3 outsiders holding a ceremonial offering we hadn't agreed to receive, while the forest around us grew crowded with invisible attention. And somewhere upriver, something screamed once, high, brief, abruptly silenced. No one spoke. We didn't need to. The jungle had already decided the tone. Jensen backed away from the stream first, slow and careful, boots feeling for stone instead of leaves. I followed, cradling the coconut bowl without knowing why, as if setting it down might be interpreted as refusal. Talia kept her headlamp off, pupils blown wide, breathing through her nose like she was afraid sound itself might be scented. We retreated to camp and did not sleep. The hours before dawn stretched elastic and unpleasant. The forest floor crackled intermittently, too light for boar, too deliberate for falling debris. Once, something brushed the netting of my hammock, testing the fibers with a dry, rasping sound that reminded me of fingernails dragged across bamboo. At first light, we took inventory. Nothing stolen, nothing disturbed, except the cooking pot. It had been moved exactly 3 meters from where Jensen left it, scrubbed clean of soot and filled to the brim with water. On top floated a cluster of pale tubers, shaved smooth, unfamiliar but carefully prepared. A trade, Talia whispered, or a correction. Jensen didn't touch it. Or bait. We advanced upriver late morning, following faint footpaths that only became visible once you stopped expecting trails to look like trails. The jungle thinned near a basalt outcrop where mist clung stubbornly to the ground, feeding a network of shallow caves eroded by water over millennia. The smell hit first. Not rot, not decay. Cooked meat. Charred fat, faintly sweet, threaded with smoke from a resin we didn't recognize. Beneath it lingered something metallic and old, like blood that had soaked into stone and never fully left. We reached the settlement at noon. Low structures had been woven directly into the rock face, arches of interlocked branches sealed with clay and fungal growth, entrances no higher than my chest. Hanging from the overhangs were tools, bone needles, obsidian flakes, sinew nets, everything arranged with intent. And skulls. Human, adult, cleaned and polished, jaws removed, cranial vaults etched with tight geometric spirals. They don't waste, Talia said faintly. They ritualize. Movement flickered inside the caves. One stepped forward. It stood just under 4 feet tall, but its proportions were wrong in subtle ways. Arms slightly overlong, ribcage flared, neck thick with corded muscle. Its face was unmistakably human, yet older somehow, heavy-browed, eyes dark and wet with a reflective sheen that caught light like animal tapetum. It looked at the bowl in my hands. Then at me. It spoke. Not Indonesian, not any Austronesian dialect I knew. The language was percussive, clipped, consonant-heavy, punctuated by sharp inhalations. The sound structure reminded me of something between speech and chewing. I swallowed and placed the bowl carefully on a flat stone. The figure approached, sniffed it, then nodded once. A ripple passed through the settlement. Dozens emerged. They moved with unsettling coordination. No chatter, no children visible. All eyes tracking us with an appraisal that felt less curious than evaluative. One brushed past Jensen and reached up, fingers pressing against his thigh. Testing. Weight. Texture. Jensen didn't flinch. The leader raised one hand, bark-wrapped wrist scarred with healed cuts. It pointed at my chest. Then it curled its fingers inward. Follow. Behind us, the jungle shifted again. And this time, it sounded close. Very close. Very close. Something exhaled behind us. Short, damp breaths that carried heat rather than sound. Jensen's shoulders tightened, but he didn't turn. None of us did. In this place, sudden movement felt like an invitation. The leader clicked its tongue once. Sharp. Final. The pressure at our backs vanished. We were guided, not escorted, not restrained, into the largest cave aperture. The ceiling dipped low enough that I had to stoop. Inside, the temperature dropped abruptly, stone leaching warmth from the air. Smoke seeped from fissures in the walls, carrying that same cooked meat scent, stronger now, layered with herbs that stung my sinuses. The chamber widened into a vaulted space illuminated by shallow fire pits. No open flames, just glowing embers fed with something fibrous and slow burning. Shadows crawled over the walls, revealing murals etched directly into the basalt. They weren't decorative. They were records. Figures like the ones surrounding us were depicted hunting deer, boar, and something taller. Humans. Spears tipped with obsidian-pierced thighs, throats, bellies. Other scenes showed smaller figures dragging bound bodies into caves, cutting with stone tools, while others waited, mouths open. At the far wall, the carvings changed. Outsiders arrived by boat. Outsiders arrived by helicopter. Outsiders did not leave. Talia's voice shook. They're not hiding from us. No, I said quietly. They're curating. A low platform dominated the center of the chamber. Upon it lay bones arranged with unsettling precision, long bones stacked, ribs aligned, vertebrae threaded on fiber cord like beads, not refuse, inventory. The leader climbed onto the platform and crouched, bringing its eyes level with mine. Up close, I could see its teeth, short, flat molars, worn smooth, built for grinding rather than tearing. It gestured toward the bones, then to us. Then drew a line across its own forearm with one finger. Division. You don't eat everyone, Jensen said slowly, as if tone might bridge the gap where language failed. The leader tilted its head. It reached behind itself and lifted a skull, smaller than an adult's, sutures not fully fused. Child. It tapped the skull twice, then pointed toward the jungle ceiling. Predators. Then it tapped its own chest. Guardians. Understanding settled over me like a bad fever. They're not just cannibals, I murmured. They're a population control mechanism. Talia stared at me. For who? Before I could answer, the cave trembled. Not an earthquake. This was localized, rhythmic. Footfalls. Heavy ones. The leader hissed. A sound of irritation, not fear. The others shifted position, forming a loose ring around us without touching. From the rear tunnel, something emerged that did not match the carvings. It was taller than the others, broader. Its skin was scarred and mottled, stretched tight over muscle too dense for its frame. Around its neck hung a necklace of finger bones, adult-sized. Its eyes fixed on Jensen. The leader snapped sharply, stepped between us and the newcomer, and shoved it back with surprising force. The larger one snarled but retreated, melting into shadow. Jensen finally spoke, voice low. That's the one taking fishermen. The leader turned to me again. It pressed its palm flat against my chest, firm, not violent, and leaned in close enough that I smelled smoke and iron on its breath. Then it placed 2 fingers against its own throat and mimed cutting. After that it pointed, not at us, but outward, toward the jungle, toward the coast, toward the blank spaces on our maps. The message landed cold and clear. You are not the meal. You are the warning. And whatever else lived out there, they were keeping it fed. The realization hollowed my chest. The leader held my gaze a moment longer, then released me and barked a series of clipped sounds toward the others. The circle loosened. 2 of the smaller figures brought forward something wrapped in layered leaves and placed it at our feet. Inside lay a forearm. Human. Fresh. Cleanly severed. Not gnawed. Not torn. Harvested. Talia staggered back, hand over her mouth. Jensen went rigid, eyes calculating rather than recoiling. The leader pointed at the limb, then toward the larger tunnel where the scarred giant had disappeared, then made a wide, encompassing gesture that seemed to include the forest, the island, the horizon. Appeasement. My thoughts aligned with sickening clarity. They feed it, I said, to keep it from hunting freely. The leader's nostrils flared. It tapped its own chest again, then the floor. Home. Guardians. Then it dragged one finger slowly across the cave wall mural of a helicopter. Choice. Outside, the jungle shifted again, but this time the movement was heavy, clumsy. not coordinated like the smaller beings. Branches snapped rather than parted. Jensen lifted his rifle instinctively. The leader slapped the barrel downward, not in anger, but in refusal. Gunfire would draw it faster. A guttural bellow rolled through the forest. Not animal, not human. Hunger with lungs. The smaller hobbit people moved swiftly now, extinguishing embers, erasing signs of habitation with practiced efficiency. The cave transformed in under a minute from settlement to stone void. The leader gestured sharply for us to follow. We were led through a narrow rear fissure barely wide enough for my shoulders. The air inside was damp and mineral heavy. The tunnel sloped upward, twisting through volcanic rock polished smooth by generations of use. Behind us, the bellow grew closer. Something large scraped against the cave entrance. Something that did not fit neatly into human taxonomy. We emerged onto a high limestone ridge overlooking the canopy. From here, I could see the river snaking toward the coast, sunlight flashing off distant surf. The leader stopped at the edge. Below, movement churned through trees, something massive, mottled gray and hairless, moving on elongated limbs that bent in directions evolution should have rejected. Its torso was bloated, asymmetrical, its head too small for its body. And around it, remains. Cloth fragments. Fishing net fibers. Human bones dropped carelessly like shells after a meal. It wasn't ritualistic. It wasn't careful. It was wasteful. The leader stepped beside me and extended its arm downward toward the creature. Then it looked up at me. Expectation. Not fear. Not pleading. Expectation. "You want us to kill it," Jensen said quietly. The leader did not blink. Talia shook her head, tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on her face. "If we remove it, what happens to them? They've built their survival around containment." The creature below lifted its head suddenly, as if sensing our gaze. Its mouth opened wide enough to split its cheeks. Inside were teeth mismatched and crowded, some human-shaped, some not. It sniffed. Then it began climbing. Up the ridge. Toward us. The leader's hand closed around my wrist. Tight. Not in restraint. In urgency. For the first time since we landed, I understood that we had misidentified the endangered species. It wasn't them. It was us.